to getting to know your baby. We're looking specifically at birth to 12 months, and this is a really important time, really, in a baby's life. Babies grow and change at an astounding pace. Each month brings new exciting developments. New moms and dads wonder what to expect and how to know if their baby's development is right on target. It's important to remember that babies develop at their own pace. There is a fairly wide window for what is normal for a baby to reach a particular developmental milestone. Some may say words at 8 months, while others don't talk until a little later, maybe after a year. Walking may be anytime between 9 and 18 months. Infant development, we divide it into 4 categories. Social, gross motor, fine motor, and language development. And first we're going to talk about social development, how the baby interacts to the human face and voice, and giving you some examples of how to improve and facilitate your child's social development. And I think this is a really important area, so I'm adding a few extra things to this slide. First of all, one thing that is really important is what we call a secure attachment that the baby has with primary caregivers. And this is most easily developed when the parent or caregiver can read the nonverbal cues of their baby. And that's one reason it's important that you don't have a whole lot of different caregivers during that first year of life. So that caregiver, mom, dad, grandparent, babysitter, can get to know that little one and what they're trying to tell you by their nonverbal cues, because of course they've got very few verbal cues at this time. And what really makes a difference is episodes that we call synchrony. I just threw the pages over here. Just looking for that really cute picture I had. I'll tell you what. Can you give me a second?
Yep.
So one of the important experiences that parents have with their children, which is a basis of secure attachment, is what we call synchrony. And I'm going to bring this up a little closer where you can see that. And look at the responses in the faces of those little babies in those 2 top pictures. And see how they are responding, eye-to-eye contact and that delight that they have in each other. Whereas that bottom picture where a mom might be depressed and not really able to interact with her baby, there's a lack of responsiveness. And I think that contrast in that picture kind of speaks a few words. What I would like to do next is kind of show you on this YouTube video about got it going? This is just a cute little example of synchrony between this child and the dad. Look at how they play. There's imitating, he's following the child's lead. And the little one just delighted. And wants to do the same thing with the dad's hands. Can you see the connection in that? And I think that's what is a great example of what we would call synchrony. That is so important to that early attachment relationship. And it's not something it's not something that you're going to always accomplish. I mean, synchrony doesn't happen all the time. But what's important is the child and the mom or dad or caregiver are seeking toward those moments, and those moments do occur at times. Actually, attachment is something that comes and goes throughout your lifetime, but it really is laying a foundation as they can interact with their parents in this situation. I'd like to show you now an experiment that was done on, I've got another video. So this next video shows what they call the still face experiment, trying to see what happens when the child is interacting and then if the mom stops interacting and how that affects the child. And this has been just a classic experiment in terms of attachment.
Extremely responsive to the emotions and the reactivity and the social interaction that they get from the world around them. This is something that we started studying 30, 40 years ago, when people didn't think that infants could engage in social interaction. In this still face experiment, what the mother did was she sits down and she's playing with her baby who's about a year of age.
I'm like, girl. Oh.
And she gives a greeting to the baby gives a greeting back to her. This baby starts pointing at different places in the world, and the mother's trying to engage her and play with her. They're working to coordinate their emotions and their intentions, what they want to do in the world. And that's really what the baby is used to. And then we ask the mother to not respond to the baby. The baby very quickly picks up on this, and then she uses all of her abilities to try and get the mother back. She smiles at the mother. She points because she's used to the mother looking where she points. The baby puts both hands up in front of her and says, "What's happening here?" She makes that screechy sound at the mother, like, "Come on, why aren't we doing this?" Even in this 2 minutes, when they don't get the normal reaction, they react with negative emotions, they turn away, they feel the stress of it, they actually may lose control of their posture because of the stress that they're experiencing.
Okay. I'm here. And what are you doing? Oh, yes.
Now, look at how quickly the little baby responds
It's a
once the
little
mom
like
becomes
the good, the bad,
responsive.
and the ugly. The good is that normal stuff that goes on, that we all do with our kids. The bad is when something bad happens, but the infant can overcome it. After all, when you stop the still face, the mother and the baby start to play again. The ugly is when you don't give the child any chance to get back to the good. There's no reparation, and they're stuck in that really ugly situation.
So I think that's pretty demonstrative of how important that interaction is with the little ones. And I can refer you to a website. It says circleofsecurity.org, and they have done a lot of work on attachment with young children, and it's really some awesome work they've done. But this diagram, I'm going to bring it up a little closer, is showing you how the parents' hands here represent both a secure base from which to explore. You know, I need you to support my exploration, watch me, delight in me, and help what I'm doing, enjoy what I'm doing. And yet sometimes as a child is out here, the world gets big and scary, and they need to come back. And that shows that circle where the hands also represent that safe haven from which, that they can return to when they need protection and comfort, and they need to organize their feelings. And I think sometimes you'll notice that when you get to a new place and the little one just wants to kind of cling to you. That's actually a really good sign, especially if they cling for a few minutes and, okay, I'm fine, I'm going to run away. Then that parent is being an awesome, secure base, and from which to explore, and also that safe haven. So I would send home this picture with you.
Mm-hmm.
And from that same website, they have a list of things that help build a secure attachment for a baby, and I kind of like how they put it, so I'm going to read a little of this to you. The name of the game is delight. Babies are hardwired to experience joy with their caregivers in their early months of life. And life is good because my parents enjoy life and they like life with me. Secondly, every baby needs a holding environment. They soak up affection and love. The gentle touch, the tenderness, the playful touch, things that we've seen in these videos. It's important that they have that hugging and that soothing, particularly within those first 12 months. There are studies that have said if a child gets that attention and they know that you're there, in that first 12 months of life, you'll have a child who will cry less later on. So, to have a little one cry it out is really not appropriate. The eyes have it. This is important. Gaze into your baby's eyes and pay close attention when they want to look back. The eye contact is very important. Whenever possible, follow your child's lead. You kind of saw that in the video where the dad was kind of doing what the baby was doing, when he was holding his cheek. Dad did the same thing. And kids love to see you imitate them. When we get into speech, they say a few things, you say those things back, and they think that's really fun. So try to kind of be sensitive and responsive to the things that they would like to do in play, and answer their subtle requests for attention, for exploration, for discovery, and take time playing with your child in that way. It says here you cannot spoil a baby. This is the thing I had just mentioned before. According to studies that have been done, contrary to those who may be saying that you will harm your child if you are too responsive to his or her needs, it isn't possible to spoil a baby in the first 9 to 10 months of life. Research findings are that the most responsive parents actually have children who are less demanding and more self-reliant when they grow older. Stay with your child when they are in difficult feelings, when they're upset, when they're angry, hurt, sad, or afraid. And as they get older, helping them to put some words onto those feelings. It's important that they can say, somebody is here with me when I am in difficulty and pain, and I can count on a good outcome following a difficult experience. You can't keep your kids away from the negative feelings, but you certainly can help them through those negative feelings. As they get a little older, maybe they do need a little bit of time out at first, or to be somewhere on their own while they kind of organize. And particularly if you do something like that you go back to that child, make sure that they know that they're loved, they understand why maybe you had them sit in their little timeout tent. I like to have little tents in the corner where they think it's just a place to gather their feelings and not really a punishment to say it's a timeout. But always make sure that you come back with that love and connection afterwards. Talking out loud about your feelings. Of course, that's not going to be in the first 12 months, but they can start to learn by pictures what some of those feelings are, and being able to put a word on their feelings kind of helps them manage it. It becomes less big and scary. And realize that mistakes happen. You only need to be good enough. Perfection in parenting is not possible. All parents know that. In fact, it isn't even recommended. A child who knows that everyone in the family makes mistakes and eventually things will be worked out are a lot better in terms of their security and independence later on. And I really like this last comment that he makes about what kind of parent a parent needs to be. Be bigger, stronger, wiser, and kind. Those are the things that are really at the heart of parenting, no matter what age the child is. So, I think that's pretty much my spiel on attachment, but I'd also like to talk to you a little bit about, this is also an excellent book by, it's actually the 0 to 3. You can do, actually spell out the words www.zerototree.org. And they put out some really awesome stuff with regard to how to parent little ones. And you can go to that website and they've got a place where you can put in any questions that you might wonder about. But just showing you what is in this book that I really think is awesome. They tell you, first of all, know yourself. You know, recognize how did you feel growing up? Recognize, did your parents help you to feel good about yourself, bad about yourself? And we'll come back to that in a little bit. What about your expectations for your child? You know, we always have dreams for a child, even before they're born. But say they're not the gender that you were expecting. Or, in particular, with the children that we work with, what if that child does have some learning disabilities or some learning delays? That might not be what we expected, and we work with children from all degrees to, you know, just a little bit of delay to those who have some really profound concerns. And I have seen some parents just awesomely take on that challenge. Okay, going back to your childhood experiences, that was what was actually next in the book. And I mentioned, how do you feel about yourself? How people get along with each other? You know, how do you feel about warmth and anger? About expressing yourself? And how to get your child to behave. You know, did you learn yelling and spanking and taking things away? So often, you know, where do we learn parenting? So we learn it from how we were parented. And to be aware of some of that, I think is very important as you're raising a little one. I couldn't find the video of it, but in a class that I went to, they had a picture of this nice little trail, you know, kind of tropical thing, going down toward a beach with the waves and the water. And the first time you see this picture, they play really nice, little soft music, relaxing. You think this is a wonderful thing. Okay, so then they go through and they play this picture the second time with this da-da-da-da-da-da-da, you know, and I don't know if that's too long ago, but you remember the shark music. And all of a sudden you play that as you're going down the trail, and you're not so sure you want to get close to that ocean. So one of the things that are suggested here is that you recognize, you know, while you're taking care of your baby, if something comes up to you and you feel really upset inside and you start to think, oh, this is bringing up my shark music. What brings up your shark music? And realize that that's you, that's not the child. And sometimes you can talk to another friend or an adult about it, or get some help with, you know, if you're always having that shark music or what they call ghosts in the nursery, sometimes it's worth getting some help to help you deal with some of those feelings so that you don't project them onto your little one. Remember that everybody has their own personal style of doing things. You don't have to be perfect at, but you do have to take care of yourself. Recognize, you know, when you've been up all day and all night for several days, that you need to maybe just get some rest. You know, I had a little one who, I think she was up every 2 hours, day and night. She wanted to eat for the first 6 months of her life. And I got to a point one morning when I got up to feed her, and I was just shaking. I was so tired. And I was so exhausted, I told my husband, if I don't get at least 6 hours of sleep straight, I'm going to die. And he was kind enough to take the morning off and let me sleep, and then I was able to go again. And sometimes you might need to find someone to help you take a break and call on what kind of support you might need. Don't be afraid to, if you've got grandparents, or if the husband can stay with the little one for a while you go out and just take a walk or do something. You'll find that your energies will come back and it'll be a lot easier. Okay, the next piece in this is to know your child. You know, what is your child's world like? You know, kind of try to put yourself in your child's shoes. It says here, being a detective. And I just love this little picture here. Understanding your child's behavior. See that little guy? Mm. Oh no, it looks like Home Alone, right? But it's, excuse me. You understand your child's behavior when you are able to think about what's going on in their world. You know, are they sick? Has there been a death in the family? Has there been a move, a sudden change in their routine and structure? What might be going on with the child in their world if you were to kind of look at it from down there instead of up here? And then understanding the ages and stages of development help you to understand their world. Particularly, they're not just little adults. They have to go through certain stages of development. And if you don't understand some of those stages of development, you may be expecting things from your child that are beyond their level to perform. And that's why learning something of child development is important, and we're going to go through that a little later in our presentation. And the last thing here, it talks about temperament. All of us have a temperament. You know, some of us may be very outgoing, some of us may be more withdrawn. You know, you can think about, you know, how well does it go together to have a very active mom and a withdrawn child. That child might need some time to warm up in a new situation. And who is the one that can maybe be the one to change their behavior the easiest? You know, the less than a year-old child, or the parent who's, you know, has more mature thinking and can understand that and say, you know, that little one works a lot better going to new places. If I just let her sit on my lap for a little while, kind of get to know the surroundings, and, you know, after a while they may start warming up, you know, and playing with grandma or grandpa that they haven't seen for a long time. And this little booklet, I like the what they've done with this. There are some studies that were done years ago on infants and different aspects of temperament, and I think they found actually 7. This book has 5. Some have only 3. But this is something that they have found. It can be modified throughout your life, and sometimes it can change. It's not 100% thing, but even as you go into adulthood and even older age, some of those aspects of temperament, especially if the environment has supported that temperament, will continue. You know, a gregarious child, I mean one who's very outgoing, is going to encourage people to play with them, and so that's going to encourage them to be more outgoing. So, you know, on the positive or negative side, you know, environment does affect the temperament, but it also, the temperament affects the environment. But the 5 aspects they mention in this book are intensity level, you know, like how, you know, I had a little one that would just scream, not cry, scream, you know. And if something didn't go the way she expected to, she was just totally devastated. And the way she cried, the way she acted was just intense. And my husband and I would just look at each other. How would you describe this little one? Intense. And she's still intense, and yet she's learned to modify that as she's grown up. And we've tried to help her with her intensity. I was not a perfect parent. Hopefully I was good enough. But that was one that was difficult for me. Activity level. Some kids will not be very active. They'll be more content just to sit in the corner and play with toys. Whereas another child may be all over the house, into this and into that and into this. And oh, what can I do next? And I had a second child who had a very high activity level. And so that was an interesting combination of temperaments even between siblings. Frustration level. Some kids can be very tolerant of changes in their routine or frustration, and it takes a while for them to get worked up and really upset. Whereas there are others who are just frustrated almost right off the bat when things don't happen the way they expect. Reaction to new people. We talked about the taking time to warm up or not. And reaction to change. You know, what about change in environment? Some kids, they won't go to sleep for a while after they've moved to a new place, and to others, it may not make a difference. What is so kind of fun about this is it explains, and I will give any parent who wants this, the Tooele site has many, but it is from the 0 to 3 people. But it discusses the intensity level of, or the scale that you can do on each of these levels, and kind of put an X where you think your child belongs. And what's really kind of fun is when we get into the last part of making good decisions in parenting, is you get a chance to see what your temperament scale is like. And so then you kind of can look at, oh wow, my temperament here is a 5 and the kid's is a 1. You know, what can we do to maybe work with that, you know? And some places you might be very much alike and really enjoy what you're doing together. And in other areas we have to do a little bit of compromise. But always remember, as it says in the final thoughts, you just have to be good enough. All parents are going to make mistakes. And what's important, even throughout their lives and relationships, is, you know, how many positives do you have to the negatives? And are you able to take those negatives and work through them? It's probably more important for a child to see their parents working through an argument than to never see them argue. Because then they realize that they can, you know, there is something on the other side, and they learn some skills from you in how to do that. I think I've pretty much gone through my notes about the book. So let's go back to the slides that we have here. Okay, this might take a minute. Did I turn out my computer? Have you got it stopped? So this is, I kind of spent quite a bit of time on this first category of development, but I felt like that was important. And it can really help you in the other areas of development. Language, we talk about receptive language, how well they understand, and expressive language is how well they're able to speak. And that give and take that you have with a secure attachment and the synchrony, playing language games with a child, you know, doing silly noises back at each other. They not only learn how to make those sounds and noises, but they learn the rhythm of conversation, of speaking and listening. You know, as you're also listening and speaking with them, even if what they say doesn't make a lot of sense to you, it's still good to do that. Fine motor development is eye-hand coordination, reaching, grasping, manipulating objects. These are all examples of what you can do, well, with your fingers. Mostly that's what fine motor refers to. Large motor, and this is what large muscles do. Holding up their head, sitting, pulling to stand, rolling over, walking. These are all examples of this. And maybe if you could, just for a second. And I think under the gross motor, I'd like to take a second to talk about tummy time. So often now that we've decided that we need to put children to sleep on their backs instead of their stomachs like they did for years, but because of the research on SIDS, they found that it's safer to sleep them on their back. The problem with that is they don't get a lot of time on their tummy, and when they're little, they're not able to get to their tummy, and so you need to give them what we call tummy time. Be sure that they're awake and alert. You don't want them getting in and laying straight on their face, and you need to be supervising them. Place your baby on a safe, firm surface. Begin with just a few minutes per session, and then working it up to where you can get up to, hopefully an hour a day is really awesome if you can do that much. Sometimes you can get down there with them and just play face to face. If the child is having a hard time with the tummy time, you can just, I've got a baby here I can show you with. You can just put the little one on your chest and just give them less of an incline. They can still kind of get there and play and get some of that tummy time. And hopefully you're against a couch here so that it's a little easier. And you can gradually get them down to where they can tolerate being flat on the floor. And so I think that's, so many parents forget that they really do need this tummy time. It's how they learn to get up on hands and knees, to crawl, to develop sitting muscles both in the tummy and the back. And so it's really important to their gross motor development. And I have a handout on that as well that I can leave. And let's go back to, let's see, we did fine motor, that's gross motor. Okay, and then this is just to give you a little bit of an idea about child development and what to expect during certain times in that first 12 months. 1 to 3 months, you'll see them smile. That usually takes a couple weeks. Early on, it'll be just to herself, but within a few months she will be smiling in response to your smiles and trying to get you to smile back at her. So actually, I guess it takes a few months for them to actually do responsive smiling. Tracking objects with their eyes, being able to track back and forth, up and down, raising their head when they're on their tummy, opening and shutting their hands, bringing their hands to their mouth, being able to grasp objects in their hands, taking swipes at things. That's where having like a little, what do you call that? The arch, where you hide little mobile things from it. Where they, first of all, they'll bat at where these things are and eventually start to grab them. And so those are things that are helpful in those first few months. 4 to 6 months, they'll start rolling over, and usually the front to back comes first. They start making babbling sounds, and this means a consonant and a vowel, like ma, 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 da, 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 ba, 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 ba. Those are actually a little bit easier, than ma, 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 ma. You'll start to see them do this repetitive pattern of a vowel and a consonant, whereas before they were just oohing and ahhing and cooing, which was only vowels. They'll start laughing, and that's really fun. When they go from smiling to laughing, it's really a treat. Reach out and grab objects, and they can start to manipulate toys and other objects with their hands. They'll start looking at it, playing with it, and they can sit with support. It doesn't show that entire thing. Sorry. Okay, 7 to 9 months, you will start to see crawling normally. This can include bum scooting and army crawling, and then standard crawling. Some of them just figure things out a little bit differently, but oftentimes they'll recognize that hands and knees crawling is the most efficient, and they can get there faster. So we can kind of help them with some of that, with what we do in our work with you. Sitting without support and being able to sit and play with toys, responding to familiar words like knowing their name. If you say no, they might stop doing something for a second, look at you. They may start even saying something, babbling at you. Doesn't necessarily mean they don't go back and start doing what you said no to. It may take a while for them to really understand that, no, you're not to play with that. They clap their hands and play games. They like patty cake, they like peekaboo. They're learning or have just learned that object permanence, that things exist even when they're not in front of them. Things they don't see still exist. And so peekaboo is just a lot of fun with learning that object permanence. They learn to pull to stand. And so now you've got one that's mobile and is working on getting toward walking and sitting in a high chair. They will start to learn to feed themselves. First of all, just with their hands, using a utensil will take longer. One of the fine motor skills that they'll develop at this time is what they call, if I just show you, a pincer grasp. So they pick an object up, usually something not as heavy as this, but they can pick it up with, the thumb and first finger rather than just grabbing it and putting it into their hands this way. And they'll start kind of doing this, but at some point they get a really neat pincer grasp, and they love to pick up Cheerios or whatever, because that's kind of fun for them. They're cruising, moving all over the room. They'll start holding on to furniture, and they're getting ready to walk. Some kids don't walk quite at a year, but they'll be starting to want to pull up and walk. You can give them a little push toy, once you kind of show them how to use it, where they can kind of walk a little bit while they're holding on to something at first. They'll usually say one or two words, and usually mama and dada, which comes from their babbling, but it doesn't continue as mama, mama, mama. And they also will recognize, your mama and your dada. So now they've connected that babbling or that shortened babble to what it represents. And that is just the beginning of learning words. And eventually they might point to objects to get your attention. This is a really good time to talk with them whatever you're doing with them. Tell them what you're doing. I'm going to fix your bath now, and we're going to get in the tub. And, it's time for dinner. We're eating some peaches. So they hear that you're talking and learning words as you start to label words, especially if they're pointing at objects to get your attention. Name that object for them. If they try to say the name of it and they don't say it exactly right, you don't get really hung up on correcting how they're saying it. They might say ba for ball and point to the ball. And rather than just saying, no, it's ball, say ball. It works best if they just say ba and you say, oh yes, ball. And that way you're not correcting them, you're not frustrating them, but you're giving them the sound of it's ball, and you might just emphasize the part of the word that they're not getting. They like to begin to pretend play by copying you and using objects correctly, like maybe a spoon, and then taking their first steps to that 12 months. Language development we've talked about a little bit, but you can help with this also by, I've got there telling them what you're doing and talking to your baby. Starting to provide books, letting them look at books, reading books to your baby, and talk about the pictures in the book. Name everything that is in the book or what's in the environment. And children who have difficulty with language, sometimes you can introduce a few baby signs, like more, if they're, now this is eat, I'm not good at sign language, this is more, so that they can kind of communicate with you if they don't quite have the words to do that yet, and it creates less frustration. Listen and respond and play, those are all just awesome things to help them with language, as well as that important social attachment development. All right, how do we deal with the infant who is in stress? What are some of the signs of stress? In a young infant, of course, they can't tell you anything, but these are things that indicate that that infant is stressed. You know, a saluting, you know, where they're kind of just, they kind of want a hand out toward you and another toward their face. Extension of the arms and the splaying of fingers that go along with that. Am I showing you what you're doing here? Frowning, grimacing, grunting. And pay attention to things like yawning, hiccups, and sneezing. If they keep doing those things, those are signs of stress in a small infant. They may arch their back or push away. They might look away. I mean, if a parent is too intrusive, you know, yeah, you want to be nice and communicate with them. But if you're always demanding, look back at me, and, you know, I want to play with you, and you're constantly in their face, that's not quite what's good for a secure attachment. It's better than nothing, but it isn't really the best. And if you notice the signs when they're getting a little bit too tired, they've had too much input, and what they need from you is to be sensitive to that and give them a little bit of time to reorganize themselves. Maybe just sitting there, being close by, maybe just, you know, giving them a touch, but not being in their face, playing with them all the time. Looking away, especially after good eye contact, becoming frantic, they move all their extremities at once, and some of them will just simply close their eyes and tune everything out, because that's how they learn to deal with that stress. What to do when your baby is stressed? You can tuck the arms and legs closely, swaddling. I'll show you that in a second. Talk to them before touching them. Some kids, you know, they get startled with the touch, and if they know you're close before you touch them, that's helpful. Turning down the lights, decreasing the noise, walking with your baby. And this is a kind of cute little acronym, the 5 S's. And I would like to, this is only a couple minutes. Okay. Go back. This one shows you where this came from, but this is how to wrap or swaddle your baby. She's folding down that top cover, and in this one she kind of pulls the hands together. Sometimes there's another way you can wrap them so it's under that hand and make it a little bit closer, but I kind of like this one. So I'm going to kind of try to do what she's doing. Second one going up over the shoulder and back. And then the last one. Is that okay? I hope I didn't cover the picture it all. Okay, let's just turn this off now. And the 5 S's, I think this is a really easy way to remember how to soothe a baby who is just really upset and crying, and you can't seem to calm them down. You'll find some of them just love the closeness of being swaddled. I think it reminds them of being in the womb and having that, okay, I'm safe here in this position. And so this one says keeping their arms out. The important thing, I haven't seen so many with the arms out, but don't swaddle over their face. Make sure that their face is clear. With the second one, sucking on something like a pacifier, you can give them your finger to suck on, but sucking calms a little one, just naturally. This side-lying position, they seem to kind of favor that when they're really upset. And then as you add to that, just a swaying movement, that motion tends to calm them down. And lastly, repeating just quietly in their ear, going shh, 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 shh. May seem a little silly, you can't always do it in public, but what that kind of represents is that, kind of like that swooshing that they heard all those months prenatally, and it kind of gives them a little bit of a more secure, close feeling, and you'd be surprised at how many little ones can be just calmed this way, and some of them like a little more, a little less movement. And that's another handout that will go home with you. And lastly, okay, that came back good. We have what they call a period of purple crying. This is something that might start in a lot of infants around a couple months of age. And it's something that you might just need to be patient to get through in terms of time and have them grow up a little bit. It's usually less, 3 to 5 months, and then they usually kind of outgrow it. But this is an important time to utilize some of those ways of calming a little one. But they use this acronym PURPLE to kind of show you what this kind of crying is like. And for some kids, temperament's different. Some will do less, some will do more. But the P meaning the peak of crying is usually during that 2 to 5 months of age. It's unexpected. You've done everything for them. You fed them, changed their diaper, you cuddled them, you have done everything that you can, and they still may not calm down, but you can't find a reason for it. It's kind of unexpected, and you just don't know why. And they may not, it says resist soothing, may not stop crying no matter what you try. They might have a pain-like face and look like they're in pain even when they're not. And it can last a long time. It says in this one author's report that it may last as long as 5 hours a day. Maybe not all at once, but there could be that much. And more frequently, it's in the late afternoon and evening. And so what do you do when your baby is crying for hours? You walk the floor, do the things that we just demonstrated. You might take them for a ride. But, you just have to recognize when that is getting you really upset, that you can't calm this crying child. You might, at that point, have to put them into the crib. And, close the door, come back every 5 to 10 minutes and make sure that they're doing okay. But it's much better to leave the baby crying in the crib than for you to get so frustrated that you might hurt your baby or shake your baby. And you've probably heard of, so I already did, a shaken baby syndrome can be very severe. I mean, it can cause brain bleeds and blindness. And just that moment of you being out of control with a crying child, you don't know what to do with them. Much better you let them cry in their crib and you go away until you can get yourself together and maybe try a few other things. Some other things with regard to safety is using the car seat with the harnesses, and belting them into the stroller, keeping small objects out of their reach so they don't choke. Do not leave them alone on a changing table or a bed. You never know when they're going to learn to roll over and surprise you. Do not use plastic bags as covers. It's so easy for little ones to get a plastic bag against their face and just not know how to take it away, and just blocks their ability to breathe. Do not leave a child under age 5 alone in the bathtub. You know, they can drown under, but they also can start messing with the handles and scald themselves with the hot water. Do not leave them in the crib with the rails down. Keep cleaning products and medications, gardening, auto supplies and stuff like that. And sometimes it's even a good idea when you've got a little one around the house to turn down the water heater temperature so that you don't have that danger of them being burned by accidentally getting that hot water. But just remember, tell your babysitters, never shake a baby, no matter how frustrated you get. I mean, they're having babysitters that have actually killed a baby. They didn't really mean to, but they got so frustrated because they were too young to really tolerate the baby crying that much. So talk to babysitters about this, and if you get frustrated, I'd rather have you just let them be in their crib and cry. And again, checking on them every few minutes, but kind of getting away from that is so much better than what can happen if, as a parent or a babysitter, you get out of hand with a baby who could be fussy and not easy to soothe. So I hope that pretty much covers development, and it looks like we need to quit because our battery is running low, just in time. So thank you so much. If you have any questions, be sure and ask, and appreciate your time. Thank you.